There are plenty of criticisms that could be made towards the state of the working class. Many people believe their working conditions are undesirable, or that they're not getting paid what they deserve, which could lead to feelings of pointlessness. These criticisms are addressed in The Factory, a 2013 novel by Japanese author Hiroko Oyamada. At the center of this novel lies the story of a young woman finding her place in the larger working world. This woman is Yoshiko Ushiyama, a prime example of the modern issues young people in the working class deal with, like boredom, routine, and dissatisfaction. Today, I want to discuss how the author of this novel touches upon the struggles of people working in and out of the factory. The Factory tells the story of a few characters finding solace in an environment that deters them from the creativities and freedoms they desire. It's a dreary, mysterious, almost otherworldly place. Throughout the novel, readers can notice a lot of strange sightings, like characters with eerie smiles when things go wrong, or strange black birds that always seem to be there in the background. These bizarre motifs would start getting noticed by the characters in the novel around the times the readers would start to pick up on them. And this is when the first parallel between the novel and reality occurs. The Factory has some sci-fi themes with some supernatural sightings such as the black birds, which don't quite seem to fit the description of any corvid on the planet. These birds represent members of the working class, constantly stuck in the same routines, not evolving or moving from the only few spots they occupy. Like the working class, these birds are perpetually in a routine until they eventually get thrown out and replaced. After some time, the workers will return the birds to the ocean. Once they are tossed into the water, the shags appear to swim back to the flock or sink and die. Once they rejoin the group, however, these shags quickly return to the standard weight and shape, making it once again impossible to tell them apart from the rest. I see this quote as a representation of the cycle of a working class member exiting and re-entering the workforce or being abandoned entirely. To touch on this comparison even further, at the end of the book, Ushiyama turns into a black bird after having many internal qualms about who she is. She starts questioning what her life amounts to and why she continues to work at the factory. This is a symbol for those who feel stuck at their dead-end, meaningless jobs and only end up staying there because it's easy. These people aren't mentally stimulated, aren't pushing themselves, and for the most part, aren't happy with their lives. After Ushiyama turns into a black bird, she says she only saw gray and a little green. This metaphor represents the bleak, almost colorless world a member of the working class may see, but a little green represents salary, the one thing to look forward to at the end of the month. In a defining moment of the novel, Ushiyama decides to take the rest of the day off work after having a rough night and takes a walk around the factory. After walking around and talking with some of her colleagues, she gets told by one of her coworkers that she should check out the factory bridge. After some deliberation, she decides to cross the bridge separating the factory's two sides. While making this journey across the bridge, she is very aware of everything around her and becomes very reflective of her time spent at the factory. She states, "I don't want to work. I really don't. Life has nothing to do with work, and work has no real bearing on life." This later contrasts with her decision to stay at the factory, but we'll return to this later. What follows is a confusing, scary series of events where Ushiyama seemingly notices too much and doesn't understand any of it. There were cars speeding past, forcing wind upon her. Thoughts racing through my head. I stopped where I was. I couldn't see the end of the bridge, ahead or behind me. How far had I come? How long had I been walking? Factory employees she's never met got off buses wearing uniforms she's never seen. If I looked up, I probably would have seen more men in gray jumpsuits, but I didn't dare. I got scared. So I turned away. I looked down into the water. I couldn't tell which way the current was moving. I thought I could feel it pulling me down. I felt like I wanted to fall in. Now, I don't know about you, but feeling this overwhelmed at something, I would try to stay as far away from it as I could. And I think that's what the author was trying to symbolize. This is what it's like to see all the working world as an outsider. It can be overwhelming, and sometimes it takes work to see where a person can fit into the organized chaos of it all. But instead of turning around to return to the safety of what she knows, she decides to keep going, into the unknown. Into the unknown! Maybe she was intrigued by the world in front of her, or perhaps she was so bored at the factory that she would rather take anything else. Whatever the case, she keeps going and eventually succumbs to everything she wants to escape. Ushiyama-san's story and the problem in her life is one that many working class people can relate to. The problem arising from the current capitalist system is a clear hierarchy of workers and powerlessness among the people. The story told in the factory describes many instances where some people are seemingly given these powerful, economically viable positions while others work endlessly, never to achieve that level. A great example of this is the contrast between Ushiyama and Yoshio how do you pronounce? The differences between Dr. Moss and Ushiyama are almost night and day. Ushiyama was given a temp position at the bottom of the workers' hierarchy, and after working for 15 years, she barely saw any change in her position. On the other side of the factory lives Dr. Moss, who was given one of the highest positions in the company and endless benefits and money for seemingly no work at all. Within the contrast of these characters, however, both remain feeling useless and unfulfilled in their careers. Dr. Moss reflects on his position by asking a higher-up at the factory, "If green roofing doesn't matter, then what am I doing here?" Ushiyama states similar concerns, "Who knows when I might quit, and if I did, I know I'd never come back." The environment cultivated at the factory causes such a stir amongst its inhabitants that both of these people share the same feelings of worthlessness in their careers. Today, many working class people face these same feelings of worthlessness, which Hiroko Oyamada no doubt had in mind while writing The Factory. Ushiyama represents this trend of people being seemingly content with working in these monotonous, unfilling positions without seeking change. After going to the other side of the bridge, seeing how overwhelming it all felt, and stating that she just didn't want to work anymore, she goes back and traps herself in that very environment that she hated. One could question why she did this and not leave to seek fulfillment, but I believe that in Oyamada's eyes, this reality is really the only realistic option. The window between reality and the world of the factory, while seemingly small and confusing, acts more like a mirror to a world that can make one feel very small and confused. Ushiyama represents those who feel insignificant in a complicated, overstimulating world, and in the end, she finds her place, even though she doesn't like it. She states how she feels at the start of her time at the factory. "At the shredder station, everyone had an apron on except me. I felt like I didn't belong. I didn't even know where to sit." The character development between the bookends of the novel is that she finally seems to find her place, even if it's one she may not have wanted. Sometimes the world can be scary. It may seem like you're in an endless cycle of waking up, working for the whole day, going to bed, and repeating it over and over again. In this repetitive world, we often find ourselves trying to escape but ultimately failing, ending up in new positions with the same problems. This is another comparison one can make to the Black Birds in this conversation between Dr. Moss and an old man. It's hard to believe that some of them wouldn't fly off to find a more forgiving environment. But they can't fly. They leap from spot to spot, but they can't go very far. Ever since the first day of school, we are taught to work for hours just to go home, work some more, and do it the next day. I see that in Ushiyama. She's tired of this cycle and wants to break out of it, but it's seemingly impossible. The world isn't sustainable without money, and there are only so many ways to make it without being lucky. The reason that Ushiyama appeals to me is because she's introspective, and she can see the flaws and the quirks of almost everything in the factory. Throughout the book, she remains herself and knows what she wants, even if it seems unachievable. She represents what we should strive to think like in the working world. However, we also need not to follow in her footsteps. What I gathered from the factory is a message to call those in working positions to strive for something better than the bare minimum currently being offered. Sometimes, when people aren't satisfied with their careers, they leave for another, in hopes of finding those feelings of worth. However, this raises another problem. To give a final quote from the novel, and one more comparison to the Black Birds, it's written that, "Throughout my observation, I have never seen any factory shack eggs or chicks. All of the birds in the flock are adults, roughly the same size. They are constantly pushing and shoving, but do not appear to communicate." Oyamada's intentions for this piece were to provide readers with introspection, to see if they are satisfied and fulfilled in their own lives, and to hopefully inspire change in the working world. We must remain critical and attentive to flaws in all parts of the world to see change. However, we must not remain content in the stagnant ways of monotonous life, or we become a black bird.